No human had ever stood alone in the center of the Railer Basin before. The alien tribe known as the Kethari gathered in a wide circle under the pale blue sky. Their bodies were tall and stone-hard, their eyes glowing like cooled embers. They were a people shaped by survival. They trusted strength, not words. Outsiders usually left in silence or never left at all. Yet this human walked forward without fear. His name was Daniel Reyes. He wore no armor, only a weather-worn jacket and boots filled with desert dust. His hands were empty, but his posture was calm, not proud, not weak, just steady. The Kethari leader, Elder Varnock, watched him closely. The elder's voice echoed across the basin like distant thunder. "Human," Varnock said, "you crossed forbidden land, speak quickly." Daniel nodded once. He bent down and placed a small metal case on the stone ground between them. When he opened it, soft blue light spilled out. "Credits." "A large amount." Whispers rippled through the Kethari circle. Even without numbers, they understood value. That much wealth could repair shields, buy medicine, or save entire bloodlines during the long winter storms. Daniel raised his head. 8,000 credits, he said clearly, for one night. Silence crashed down harder than any weapon. Some of the younger Kethari shifted in anger. Others leaned forward in confusion. The words felt wrong, dangerous. Among the Kethari, one night carried heavy meaning. It was tied to trials, sacrifices, and oaths that could not be undone. Elder Varnock's eyes narrowed. "Explain," he demanded. Daniel took a slow breath. He knew this was the moment that mattered. "I don't want land, I don't want power," Daniel said. "I want to stay here until sunrise. I will take no shelter. I will ask for no protection." Murmurs grew louder. Varnock stepped closer, towering over the human. "You offer wealth for suffering. Is this a human trick?" Daniel shook his head. "It's a human choice." The elder studied him carefully. Daniel's body showed signs of long travel, old scars, tired shoulders, eyes that had seen loss. This was not a rich man chasing danger for pride. This was someone who had already paid many prices. "You will face the night of teeth," Varnock warned. "Storms, predators, cold strong enough to break bone." "I know," Daniel said softly. "Why?" the elder asked. Daniel hesitated. Then he answered honestly. "Because your people will be attacked tomorrow night, and you don't see it coming." The circle went still. Some laughed sharply, others hissed in offense. Varnock's voice dropped. "You claim to see our future." "No," Daniel replied. "I've seen the signs, the ground vibrations, the broken paths. Something big is moving toward this basin." The elder searched Daniel's face for lies. He found none, only urgency. "If you are wrong," Varnock said, "you will die alone." Daniel nodded again. "I understand." After a long moment, the elder raised one heavy hand. "The night is yours," he declared. "But know this, human, if you fail, your name will be forgotten before dawn." The Kethari stepped back, forming a clear boundary. Daniel picked up his case and walked toward the open basin, where the wind already began to howl. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the temperature dropped fast. The ground vibrated faintly under his boots. Daniel sat on a cold stone, staring into the dark. "One night," he whispered to himself. Behind him, the Kethari watched. None of them believed the human would survive. And none of them understood yet that humans did not measure worth by how long they lived, but by what they were willing to face alone. The sun was gone, and the Railer Basin belonged to the night. Cold crept across the stone like a living thing. Daniel Reyes stood alone beyond the safety line of the Kethari camp, his breath forming thin white clouds. The stars above looked sharp, almost cruel, as if watching to see whether the human would break. Behind the ridge, the Kethari waited in silence. Elder Varnock had ordered them not to interfere. This was the human's trial now. Among the Cathari, watching without helping was the hardest test of all. Daniel knelt and pressed his palm against the ground. It was trembling, not from the wind, from movement far below. Daniel closed his eyes and listened. Years of survival work on forgotten planets had taught him this skill. The rhythm was slow, heavy, and deliberate. Whatever was coming was large and hungry. He opened his case again. The credits were still there, untouched. He pushed them aside and pulled out tools instead. Simple human tools. Sensors taped together, a short-range signal beacon, and 2 power cells held together with worn wire. Nothing advanced, nothing impressive. But it was enough. Daniel placed the sensor poles into the ground in a wide arc, his fingers numbing as the cold deepened. Every few steps he paused, listening again. The vibrations were getting closer. In the camp, some of the Cathari grew uneasy. A young scout whispered, "The stone is shaking." Elder Varnock said nothing, but his claws dug into the ground. A sudden gust of wind swept through the basin, carrying a low, distant sound. Not a roar, more like breathing deep and endless. Daniel felt it in his chest. He stood up slowly and activated the beacon. A sharp pulse of sound cut through the darkness. It was too high for most ears, but it traveled deep into the stone. The vibration changed direction almost instantly. Daniel swallowed hard. It worked, but only partly. The ground cracked open 50 steps away. A massive shape rose from below, covered in thick plates of dark skin. Its eyes glowed faintly, not from sight but from heat. This was a dread burrower, an ancient predator the Cathari spoke of only in warning songs. Gasps spread through the camp. "This was not one creature," someone whispered. "It is a path maker." Daniel backed away slowly, never turning his back. His heart hammered in his ears, but his mind stayed clear. Panic would kill him faster than teeth. The burrower shifted, confused by the signal. It struck the ground with its armored head, searching for the source. Daniel triggered the second power cell. The beacon screamed louder. The creature turned fully toward him. Good. That meant it was moving away from the camp. Daniel ran. The cold air burned his lungs as he sprinted across the basin. The ground shook violently behind him as the burrower followed, tearing through stone like soft sand. He reached a narrow ravine just as the creature burst from the earth again. Without stopping, Daniel jumped. Pain exploded through his legs as he hit the slope and rolled hard. His shoulder slammed into rock, sending a sharp cry from his throat. Above him, the burrower tried to follow. The ravine walls collapsed inward under its weight. Stone and dust swallowed the massive body with a thunderous crash. Silence followed. Daniel lay still, gasping, staring up at the stars. Every breath hurt. His body screamed at him to rest, to sleep. But the night was not over. In the distance, the ground continued to tremble. More were coming. Back at the camp, the Cathari stared into the darkness where the human had vanished. No one spoke. Elder Varnock finally broke the silence. "The human did not flee," he said slowly. "He led death away from us." The young scout asked, voice shaking, "Will he return?" Varnock looked toward the trembling basin. "If he does," the elder said, "then this night will be remembered." And far beyond their sight, bruised and bleeding, Daniel Reyes forced himself to stand again. "One night," he whispered. Then he walked back into the darkness. The night grew heavier after the first collapse. Daniel Reyes moved slowly now, his body aching with every step. Dust coated his face and blood dried along his sleeve where sharp stone had cut him. The cold no longer shocked him. It settled deep, pressing into his bones. The ground still trembled. He stopped near a rise of broken stone and listened. The vibrations were scattered, uncertain. The beacon had confused the burrowers, but it would not hold forever. Creatures like that learned quickly. Daniel looked toward the faint glow of the Cathari camp in the distance. He could not let the beast circle back. He opened his case again. Only one power cell remained. "One chance," he murmured. Carefully, he adjusted the beacon's frequency, lowering it, spreading the signal wider but weaker. This would not anger the burrowers. It would invite them. The earth responded almost immediately. A deep rumble rolled beneath his feet, not one voice but many. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. He had hoped for 2, maybe 3. There were at least 4. He planted the beacon at the highest point of the rise and backed away, dragging his injured leg. He positioned himself downhill, where loose stone and sand might slow pursuit. The first burrower erupted from the ground with violent force, spraying debris into the air. Another followed, then another. Massive shapes moved blindly, guided by sound and vibration. Daniel's chest burned as fear tried to take control. He raised his arms and shouted. The sound echoed across the basin, raw and human. The creatures turned. Daniel ran. This time there was no clean path. The ground collapsed beneath him, sending him sliding down into a shallow pit. He slammed hard against stone, the breath driven from his lungs. One burrower crashed down after him. Daniel rolled just in time as its armored body struck the ground where his head had been. The impact cracked stone like glass. He grabbed a loose metal rod from the debris, a piece of old mining equipment, and jammed it into a gap between the creature's plates. The burrower thrashed, shrieking in a sound too low to hear, but powerful enough to shake the pit. Daniel was thrown against the wall, pain exploding through his ribs. Still, he did not let go. The beacon screamed. The other burrowers converged, drawn by the chaos. They collided with each other, massive bodies slamming together in confusion. The pit collapsed further, trapping them in a storm of stone and dust. Daniel crawled out just as the ground swallowed the fight behind him. Silence followed again. Daniel lay on his back, staring at the dark sky. He could not feel his left arm. Every breath was shallow and sharp. For the first time that night, doubt crept in. He thought of Earth, of quiet rain, of a small kitchen with a cracked window, of choices he never made. He laughed weakly. "I always choose the hard way," he whispered. Far away, the Cathari camp was alive with motion now. They could see the destruction. They could feel the aftershocks. A healer spoke in disbelief. "He is still alive." Elder Varnock closed his eyes. In all his years, he had never seen a single being draw so much danger onto himself without seeking glory. This was not madness. This was purpose. Back in the basin, Daniel pushed himself upright using a broken stone. He forced his numb arm to move, biting back a cry when pain returned in a sharp wave. The beacon flickered. The last power cell was draining fast. Daniel knew the truth then. Even if no more burrowers came, the night itself might kill him. The wind strengthened, slicing through his torn jacket. His vision blurred at the edges. Still, he adjusted the beacon one final time, setting it to pulse irregularly. Unpredictable. Human. He limped toward a narrow canyon, planning to draw anything left far away from the camp. Each step felt heavier than the last. Behind him, the beacon's light faded to a weak glow. Daniel did not look back, because if he did, he might stop. And humans, when they stand alone in the dark, survive not because they are strong, but because they refuse to quit, even when the night demands it. Dawn was far away, but Daniel Reyes had stopped thinking about time. The night had become a living weight pressing against his chest, and every breath was a reminder of how fragile he was. His legs burned and his arms felt like lead, yet he moved because stopping meant death. The narrow canyon offered little shelter. Sharp stone cut into his skin as he crawled and dust filled his throat. The echoes of the burrowers' collapse still rattled in his ears, but he could not rest. Not yet. He knew the creatures might rise again, or another danger could emerge. The desert was never still. In the distance, he could see faint signs of the Cathari camp, small lights flickering over stone shelters. He knew they were watching. Some had tried to follow him, but the elders had warned them, "Do not intervene." Humans, Daniel thought grimly, were strange. He could survive alone, and the Cathari had to understand that strength wasn't only physical, it was choice. Daniel reached the top of a jagged ridge. He paused, head bowed, feeling the first real ache of fear. His body screamed for sleep, for warmth, for food, but he had none. Only the cold stone and the promise he had made. He set his jaw and pulled out a small device from his case, a basic human sensor. Nothing complicated, just a tool to detect vibrations in the earth. He turned it on and listened. There was movement again, faint but steady, deeper in the canyon. Not the burrowers this time. Something larger, slower, something that would test him differently. Daniel's heart raced, but not with panic, with focus. Humans often thrived when they had no choice but to act. His fingers worked quickly, planting the sensor poles, adjusting the frequency. Every step had to be precise, every sound counted. One mistake and everything could fall apart. Yet he pressed on, willing his body to obey even when it ached beyond reason. Hours passed in silence, broken only by distant echoes of wind and stone. Then, without warning, a massive shadow crossed the canyon floor. A predator, or something older than the desert itself. Daniel could not be sure. He only knew it moved too fast to see, too strong to confront directly. He acted on instinct, setting a small trap of stones and wires that hummed a signal in a tone only the creature could hear. The vibrations shifted, the shadow faltered, and for a moment the canyon became still again. Daniel sank to the ground, feeling the stone beneath him. Every muscle trembled. His body begged for rest. And yet in that trembling he felt something rare and unexpected, a sense of control. For the first time that night, the human realized that survival was not only about avoiding death, it was about shaping it. Back at the Cathari camp, Elder Varnock stood with the healers, watching the canyon from a distance. He did not speak. The younger Cathari whispered among themselves, marveling that a single human could move through such dangers without faltering. The elders rarely saw courage like this. It was not loud, not boastful, not demanding. It was quiet, relentless, and strangely beautiful. By the time Daniel finally lowered his body to rest on a stone ledge, the first hints of dawn glimmered on the horizon. He did not sleep. He could not. But he allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The night had tried to break him, and yet he had moved, thought, and acted when instinct alone would have been useless. The Cathari might not understand yet, but they would. They always did. He whispered into the wind, barely audible over the canyon's emptiness. One night is enough. And for the first time, Daniel felt it, the weight of the human spirit, heavy, relentless, unyielding. A spirit that did not demand recognition but earned it through action. The night had tried to consume him, but he had held it, not with power, not with strength, with refusal to surrender. Above him, the sky slowly shifted to pale orange. The first light of day stretched across the desert, painting the jagged stones in soft gold. Daniel Ray's, battered and broken, rose slowly, his eyes fixed not on himself, but on the camp he had protected from the shadows. His body whispered in pain, but his mind was clear. He had survived the night. And the Cathari, watching silently from afar, knew this night would not be forgotten. The first light of dawn painted the Railer Basin in soft gold and pink, but Daniel Ray's barely noticed. His body was battered, every joint screaming, and his clothes were torn and stiff with sand. Still, he moved, slowly, carefully. The human instinct to act, to protect, and to endure had not left him. Behind him, the Cathari emerged from their shelters, watching. Elder Varnock remained still, his gaze fixed on the distant ridge where Daniel had spent the night alone. The tribe had expected him to fail, to become another warning etched into their histories. Instead, he had survived. And more than that, he had kept the camp safe. Daniel began checking the camp's perimeter. Broken stones, disrupted sand, and deep marks in the earth showed where the predators had struck. He moved from point to point, touching walls, examining the sensors he had placed. Though exhausted, he was meticulous. The Cathari followed silently, curious and cautious. No human had ever stayed this long, worked this carefully, or faced the desert's dangers without pleading for help. A young Cathari, barely grown, finally spoke. You stayed alone." His voice was trembling, partly from fear, partly from awe, through all of it. Daniel looked at him and nodded, forcing a smile despite the pain in his ribs. Alone doesn't mean powerless, it means careful. Watch, listen, think. The child's eyes widened. That simple truth carried weight that no weapon ever could. Elder Varnock finally stepped forward, his massive shadow falling over the human. "You endured what none of us could," he said, his voice low but steady. "Yet you seek nothing in return." Daniel shook his head. "I don't want credit. I wanted to survive the night and keep yours safe." The Cathari murmured among themselves. Survival was expected, yes. Courage was honored, but mercy, thoughtfulness, and skill together, that was something rare, even legendary. Humans were often dismissed as fragile. They lacked strength, speed, and the instincts of a true predator. Yet here was one, standing alone, challenging both nature and expectation. Daniel moved toward the campfire, the first warmth he had felt in hours. The Cathari offered him water and food, though he took little. He wasn't hungry. His body craved rest, yes, but what he truly needed was to ensure the tribe understood the night had been more than luck or accident. He went from shelter to shelter, repairing minor damages with scraps from his case. Wires tied, stones reset, simple adjustments to prevent collapse in the next storm. The Cathari watched in silence, slowly learning the human approach. Precise, quiet, deliberate, and unwavering. By mid-morning, the elders gathered. Elder Varnock spoke again, his voice now carrying the respect earned only through deeds. "This human, Daniel Reyes, has given us more than our lives. He has given us knowledge, foresight, and proof that courage comes in many forms." Daniel bowed slightly, exhaustion pressing his body toward the ground. He expected a reward, perhaps praise, but none came in gold or ceremony. Instead, there was something heavier, acknowledgement, a respect that could not be bought, earned with effort, patience, and facing the night alone. He glanced toward the horizon, where the desert stretched endlessly. He had survived predators, storms, and the weight of doubt, not just from himself, but from the Cathari, who had believed him fragile and incapable. The tribe had learned that night what humans often knew instinctively. Strength is not only measured by power, but by the courage to act when the odds are impossible. Daniel Reyes had given them more than protection. He had given them perspective. The Cathari slowly dispersed, leaving him near the central fire. Elder Varnock lingered, placing a clawed hand on Daniel's shoulder, a gesture of honor, rare among his people. "The night is over," he said, "but what you did will echo through generations." Daniel exhaled, the first real relief in hours, maybe days. He had done what he came to do. The storm, the predators, the darkness, they had tested him. He had endured. And in doing so, he had shown that even a single human could shape the outcome of an entire tribe's fate. He finally sat, letting the warmth of the sun sink into his chilled bones. Around him, the desert was alive again, but quiet. The predators were gone. The tribe was safe. And the human who had walked alone through the night knew deep in his chest that one night, one small, impossible night, had changed everything. The sun climbed higher over the Railer Basin, burning away the last chill of the night. Daniel Reyes stood by the campfire, looking at the Cathari tribe moving about their daily routines. For the first time, he felt something strange. Not fear, not fatigue, but a quiet connection to these alien beings who had once regarded him with doubt. He remembered their first looks of disbelief, the murmurs when he placed his case on the stone ground. They had thought him fragile, unworthy, and foolish. Yet he had survived the impossible, and in doing so, he had earned something more valuable than any amount of credits he had offered: trust. The elders gathered again, this time not to judge but to listen. They asked him questions about his methods, his tools, his strange human ways. Daniel explained in simple words, careful to make it understandable, how he read the vibrations in the earth, how he predicted the predator's movements, and how humans often survived by thinking faster than their enemies. The Cathari were amazed. Skills like this were unheard of among their kind, and the idea that one human could manage them alone left a mark in their minds. A young Cathari boy, barely grown, approached Daniel. "Will you teach us?" he asked, eyes wide with curiosity. "Teach us to survive like you." Daniel looked down at the boy and smiled softly. "I can show you a few things," he said, "but the rest you will learn yourselves. That is how humans endure. We survive not because we are stronger, but because we never stop learning." The elders nodded. This night had become a lesson, a story that would be told to children and remembered in the songs of the tribe. It was not the wealth he had offered, not the simple act of being present. It was the courage, the endurance, and the intelligence he had demonstrated. Daniel had shown them a new standard. Later, as Daniel helped repair the final shelters and strengthen the walls against future storms, Elder Varnock approached him quietly. "You came with credits," he said, voice low and serious, "but you leave us with something more, something no one else could give." Daniel shook his head. "I only wanted to survive the night. I didn't come to teach. I didn't come to be remembered." Varnock's eyes glimmered with respect. "That is why you will be remembered, because humans do not ask for glory. They act, they endure, they shape what others cannot." For the first time, Daniel felt the weight of the night lifting, not from exhaustion alone, but from understanding. He realized that this one human, facing alien predators, storms, and impossible odds, had changed the Cathari's perception forever. They would no longer see humans as weak. They would see potential, courage, innovation, a mind that could survive where brute strength failed. As the sun reached its peak, Daniel prepared to leave the camp. His body ached, his muscles burned, and every joint screamed. Yet he felt light in a way he had not expected. He had come to the basin alone, offering wealth for one night. Now he was leaving with something far more valuable, a connection to a people he had helped save, a story that would ripple across the desert, and a reminder that even one human could influence the fate of an entire tribe. Before he walked away, Varnock handed him a carved stone. It was smooth, marked with Cathari symbols for courage, endurance, and honor. "Keep this," the elder said, "so that when you look back on this night, you remember that you changed us forever." Daniel accepted the stone, feeling its weight in his hands. Not a reward, not a payment, just recognition. A silent promise that his actions mattered. He turned toward the horizon, toward the path that would take him back to the edge of the desert and eventually to human space. For the first time, he looked at his own life not as a series of small, lonely steps, but as a chain of choices that could shape worlds. That one night, one single, impossible night, had proven something universal. Humans were not merely fragile, short-lived creatures. They were adaptable, resilient, and capable of inspiring awe in beings far stronger, older, and wiser than themselves. Daniel walked on, carrying the carved stone in his pocket, his thoughts drifting toward Earth. Somewhere between the sand, stone, and alien skis, he smiled quietly to himself. One night had changed everything. The desert was quiet when Daniel Reyes finally stepped beyond the Railer Basin, the morning sun warming his exhausted back. Every muscle in his body ached, every scar throbbed, yet his mind felt lighter than it had in years. One night, just one, had changed more than he could have imagined. Behind him, the Cathari tribe continued their routines. Their camp was repaired, their defenses strengthened, and their spirits lifted. And somewhere among them, Elder Varnock watched quietly, a silent acknowledgement passing between human and alien. The trust and respect Daniel had earned could not be measured in credits, weapons, or treaties. It was deeper, older, and far more powerful. As he walked through the dry plains toward the edge of their territory, Daniel paused for a moment. He held the carved stone the elder had given him in his hand. Its weight was tangible, yet its meaning was heavier. Courage, endurance, honor. Each symbol told a story of a human who had faced overwhelming danger alone and had not wavered. He remembered the night vividly. The tremors under his feet, the glowing red eyes of the burrowers, the endless winds that cut through him like knives, and the moments when every step felt impossible. Yet he had moved forward, step by step, thinking, observing, surviving. That night had tested him, challenged him, and almost broken him. But it had also revealed what he had always known. Humans were unpredictable, relentless, and capable of shaping their own fate against all odds. Daniel finally reached a ridge overlooking the desert. From here, he could see the Cathari camp shrinking into the horizon, small lights flickering like distant stars. A wave of emotion hit him, a mix of relief, pride, and humility. He had come for one night offering 8,000 credits, but what had transpired was beyond any currency. He had given them protection, guidance, and hope. And in return, they had given him recognition, trust, and something he had never expected: connection. The memory of the young Cathari boy's eyes flashed in his mind. "Will you teach us?" the boy had asked. Daniel had smiled, knowing that survival was not just about learning from one person. It was about carrying knowledge forward, sharing it, and allowing others to adapt it. That boy and many others like him would remember this night. They would tell their children. They would sing songs of the human who had dared to face the impossible alone. Daniel's thoughts drifted to earth, to quiet streets and familiar voices. A part of him longed for simplicity, yet he knew the desert had changed him. Humans were often underestimated across the stars, dismissed as fragile and short-lived. But he had proven something universal. Strength was not only in muscle or speed. It was in courage, foresight, and the will to act when others could not. He walked onward, the stone still in his pocket, sunlight warming his shoulders. Somewhere far across alien skies, the tribe would remember. The predators would avoid their lands, for they knew a human had stood against them and survived. And the story of a human who offered one night and gave everything would echo across generations. As he reached the edge of the desert, Daniel stopped and looked back. The basin stretched endlessly, glowing under the morning light. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the night lift from his chest. One night, he realized, was enough. Enough to save lives, enough to inspire respect, enough to change perceptions of an entire species. One night had proven that humans could endure, innovate, and lead, even among beings far stronger and older than themselves. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "One night is enough." The wind carried his words across the basin, across the desert, across the hearts of the Cathari. Somewhere, Elder Varnock nodded in silent agreement. Somewhere, the young boy smiled, imagining the human who had walked alone through death, storm, and darkness. Daniel turned and walked down the plain, toward unknown lands, toward new challenges, carrying a quiet truth that would never leave him. Humans were not measured by how long they lived, but by what they could endure, what they could give, and how they could change the world in a single night. And in that realization, he felt something rare and unshakable: peace.